Today we'll understand pain pathway. First of all, what is pain, right? That's a basic question, right? So pain is an unpleasant sensation associated with some emotional experience sometimes, and it happens whenever there is a potential tissue damage. So it means when a tissue is about to undergo some damage, what happens is it releases some chemicals, and that initiates the sensation, and that we call it as pain. So whenever a patient feels pain, it means his tissues are about to undergo some damage. That is the main reason the patient experiences pain. And remember, it is an unpleasant sensation associated with some emotional experience. Here, emotional experience meaning maybe you can start crying, right? And a pain is also pain, you feel the pain, and that is what is pain. Next, what are the different types of pain, or how do we classify pain? Usually, we use the terms fast pain versus slow pain, meaning if you experience a pricking pain, for example, the needle prick, which you guys did the practicals in hematology. So, the prick is an example for a fast pain. To give an example for a slow pain, usually the toothache, or you get a body pain during any viral fever, all these are examples of slow pain. The pain can further be classified into superficial and deep pain depending upon the site of generation of pain. When I refer to superficial pain, it means, for example, if you have a cut injury on your fingers, so that is a superficial pain. Deep pain can be a muscular pain, okay, so you have some muscle sprain, okay, or sometimes a bone fracture. All this will lead to deep pain. Now, another way of classifying pain is somatic pain and visceral pain. When I tell it as somatic pain, it means the pain is from it is a well localized pain which is coming from the superficial structures. Okay, example, you have an injury in the hand, that is again an example for a somatic pain. Visceral pain meaning usually it will be the visceral organs are getting injured, and that is what leads to visceral pain. Remember, example can be abdominal pain like appendicitis or a gastritis. All these are different examples for visceral pain. Now, before we understand the pathway of pain, we need to understand the receptors which are responsible for or sensing the pain stimulus. We have two types of pathways. Okay, remember we have a fast pain and slow pain. And fast pain is being carried by A delta fibers, slow pain is being carried by C fibers. Accordingly, the receptors have been classified. Okay, the A delta mechanical receptors, they mainly carry fast pain. Remember that. So the velocity of conduction is also very fast, and we all know the thicker the nerve fiber diameter, it faster is the conduction. So when I tell A delta fiber pathway, it is a thick fiber. Okay, it's almost about 1 to 5 mm. Slow C fibers carry slow pain, and the fiber diameter is very thin. So if you compare here, this is almost 1 to 5 mm. The slow fiber pathway is around 1 mm. Roughly, if I take, it comes to around 1 mm. Right? This is the diameter of the nerve fiber which is carrying the impulses. Right? So here, A delta fibers in the lower end, they have a receptor. We call it as A delta mechanical receptors, and they discharge only in response to intense mechanical stimuli. Right? Whenever there's any crushing injury or there is an needle prick injury, all this will are carried by your A delta fibers, and the receptors which detect them are called A delta mechanical receptors. Now compare that with the C fiber receptors. Pain receptor is otherwise called nociceptors because pain is otherwise called nociception. Another term for pain is nociception. So the receptors are called nociceptors. And remember, the C fiber receptors they can detect mechanical, thermal, or chemical injury. Any of these, for example, if you've got burnt, it can be detected by your C fiber receptors. Clear? Hope you guys are clear with the types of pain receptors. Okay, because if you understand receptors, then we'll go into pathway later. Now, so the impulses are being carried by from the receptors by the nerve fibers. It reaches the spinal cord, right? Now the question is where exactly it terminates in the spinal cord. Okay, so to understand that, now we'll understand a little bit about the spinal cord. Okay, so if here I'm drawing a cut section of a spinal cord, this is the dorsal aspect which I'm drawn. This is a central canal. So this is the dorsal aspect. Clear? This is the anterior horn of the spinal cord. Okay, this is the ventral aspect, otherwise the anterior half of the spinal cord. So the nerve fibers, the starting from the receptors. Okay, let me draw the A delta fibers. So the A delta fibers, they come to the spinal cord, okay, and end in lamina 1 and 5. I think if you can understand before you go into these understanding of the spinal cord, you should know that the spinal cord, the horns, no, the dorsal horn, ventral horn, they have been divided into some layers or laminas, okay, and we call these laminas as rexed lamina. Okay, so it's numbered. So first one is 1, the next would be 2, then layer 3, 4, 5, so on. So now A delta fibers, okay, which is carrying fast pain, is gonna end in lamina 1 and 5. Clear? Now if I talk about the C fibers, okay, the C fibers which is starting from the, so the C fibers which is starting or carrying the slow pain, okay, these fibers, if I see, the cell body of these neurons are located in the dorsal root ganglia, okay, but they end in lamina 2. Hope you guys understanding this concept here. The whole spinal cord has been they have been layered, okay, for understanding purpose, and they have, each layers have different functions. So understand, the C fiber pathway will end in the lamina 2, A delta fibers will end in lamina 1 and 5. This lamina 2 is also called as substantia gelatinosa of Rolando, and that is mainly involved in gate control theory of pain. Okay, it is involved in gate control theory of pain. If you go to the video section, you will find a separate video on this, how exactly the pain information is processed in the lamina 2 of the spinal cord. Okay, so the lamina 2 of spinal cord, how it is processed. Now what you're understanding here is the C fibers are terminating in the lamina 2. So this slide we have learnt about the how the pain fibers are terminating in the spinal cord. So now before I move into the pathway proper, some simple information which you need to understand is, so this is a spinal cord, this is the dorsal horn, and this is the anterior horn, clear, and this is where is your central canal of spinal cord. So this is the central canal of spinal cord. Now for any pathway, the ascending path, let us just understand what is ascending and descending tracts here. See, pain from the skin, when a person experiences pain, that information has to go to brain, right? So that is being carried by ascending tract. So when a person touches a hot object, the person takes away the hand from the hot object, right? So for that, the muscle has to be stimulated for contraction, right? So that is controlled by the descending tract, because the information is coming from the brain to the muscle, so that we call it as descending tract. So what we are learning now is pain pathway, so that is your ascending tract, right? We'll slowly see in an ascending tracts how many neurons are there, because we need to, like, if you simplify, physiology is very simple actually if you understand it. So let us see now how many neurons are there. Okay, to simplify, now I'll tell you there are 3 neurons. Let us name these neurons as first order neuron, okay, first order neuron, second order neuron, and third order neuron, meaning there are 3 neurons in this pain pathway. So one is starting from the receptor, clear. This I'm drawing the first neuron. The cell body of this neuron is present in the dorsal root ganglia. So the neuron which is starting from the receptor ends in the spinal cord with the cell body being in the dorsal root ganglia. I call this neuron as a first order neuron. Okay, I'll just write this as a first order neuron. So now we all know pain pathway crosses to the opposite side. So to understand this better, we need to first draw a midline. Let me draw a midline here, meaning if this is the right half of the body, this side would be the left half of the body. So we know the pain from the right side of the body will go to the left cerebral hemisphere. So the pain fibers have to reach here, right? So the first order neuron has carried the impulses till the spinal cord. So now the second order neuron, what happens is, it starts from the spinal cord, okay, it crosses in front of the central canal to the opposite side. Right, in the opposite side, if you observe, there are 3 things which you need to notice. Okay, here, this is the yellow color which I'm drawing is the dorsal funiculus. This is the lateral funiculus. This area is the anterior funiculus. So whenever a fiber is going in the anterior funiculus, when a fiber comes like this to anterior funiculus, we call it as anterior spinothalamic tract. If any fibers passes in this lateral funiculus, we call it as lateral spinothalamic tract. If a pathway is going through this dorsal funiculus or a posterior funiculus, we call that pathway as dorsal column. Hope you're understanding this. I'll repeat again. See, the second order neuron which has crossed to the opposite side can either go in the anterior half of the spinal cord, or it can go in the lateral half of the spinal cord, and it can go up in the brain. Clear? So if a fiber goes in the lateral funiculus, we call it as a lateral spinothalamic tract, because it is placed in the lateral funiculus and it is starting from the spinal cord, goes and ends in the thalamus. So we call it as lateral spinothalamic tract. If it goes in the anterior funiculus or the anterior part of the spinal cord, we call it as anterior spinothalamic tract. Clear? So the dorsal column I'll explain in another video. For currently time being, remember anterior and lateral. Clear? Right. So now let us understand where exactly these pain fibers are going. Okay. So remember, pain is carried by the lateral spinothalamic tract. So now you'll understand. So the second order neuron which crosses to opposite side actually goes to the lateral funiculus. From here it is going to the thalamus. Clear? It is going to thalamus. And you all know thalamus, the main important function of thalamus is relay center. Relay center meaning all the sensations are stopping here in the thalamus. Some form of assessment of these sensations are happening at the thalamus itself. Clear? So the second order neuron, what has happened? The cell body is present in the spinal cord. It crosses in front. This is the central canal of the spinal cord, right? So the second order neuron, which is started from the spinal cord from the right side, crosses in front of the central canal, ascends in the lateral funiculus, and it ends in the thalamus. Clear? Remember, in the thalamus there are so many nuclei. Specifically, it is the VPL nuclei of thalamus. That is where the second order neuron ends. The third order neuron starts from the thalamus and goes to specifically to area number 312. That is your parietal cortex, which is concerned with processing of pain information. So hope you are understanding here. So there are three neurons. So the one which is crossing to the opposite side is your second order neuron. The one which is starting from the thalamus to the spinal cord is your third order neuron. So what have you understood by this is, it's a very simple pathway. We have only three neurons. One starts from the receptors and ends in the spinal cord. Right? The second order neuron starts from the spinal cord, crosses to opposite side, and all goes and ends in the thalamus. That is the VPL nuclei of thalamus. Third order neuron starts from the VPL nuclei of thalamus and goes and ends in the area number 312. So this is a simplified pain pathway. Clear? And remember, all the ascending tracts, they have three neurons. Clear? Right. Now we'll move on to the pain pathways in detail. We'll see slight differences are there, but what I just now explained is a generalized ascending tract pathways. Okay. So now let us describe. There are two pain pathways. One is paleospinothalamic pathway and neospinothalamic pathway. So newer meaning it is a recent origin. Clear? Neo meaning new or recent origin. Paleo meaning it's an old pathway. So whenever we know something which is old pathway, meaning they are mainly concerned with dull aching pain. Recent meaning it's an advanced one, right? So usually it carries your fast pain. So the slow pain or a dull aching pain is being carried by your paleospinothalamic pathway. Neospinothalamic pathway carries fast pain. Right. Now let us understand the paleospinothalamic pathway. It is phylogenetically or the development wise, this is the oldest pathway, and this pathway carries slow pain. As I already mentioned previously, the slow pain is being carried by the C fibers, and the receptors for these pathways is C nociceptors. These are the receptors for slow pain. And the first order neuron, which starts from the C nociceptors, they terminate in lamina 2 of spinal cord. The second order neuron crosses to opposite side. Remember, while it is crossing, what information you need to remember here is it crosses in front of the central canal to opposite side, and it will ascend upon in the contralateral side. ST pathway meaning spinothalamic pathway, because now we know we are talking about the spinal cord. So the fibers are going from the spinal cord till thalamus. So we call this pathway as spinothalamic pathway. Usually whenever we refer the word tract, no, remember it is nothing but a bundle of nerve fibers. So now in the previous diagram what I was explaining is only one fiber going up, right? So now imagine some millions of neurons are going up and they all go together as a group, right? That bundle of nerve fibers is what we call it as tract. So this is a spinothalamic tract or an ascending tract. So now the second order neuron here, there is a slight difference, okay? So second order neuron usually will end in the thalamus. Clear? If I'm correct again. So the second order neuron crosses in front of the spinal cord central canal and reaches and ends in the thalamus. But when this pathway is going up to the brain, it will give branches in the brainstem, because from the spinal cord, okay, this is the spinal cord. Here you have your brainstem, midbrain, pons and medulla, and then you have your brain, right? So now when a pathway is ascending up in the spinal cord, it will pass through all this brain stem and then reaches your thalamus. Thalamus is somewhere in it's a subcortical structure. So this is where your thalamus is present, right? This is your thalamus. So when this pathway is going up in the brain stem, remember it will give a few branches here in the brain stem. One of the branches goes to reticular formation, the other branch goes to midbrain nuclei, and one of the branches goes to hypothalamus. Somewhere here also the fibers will give a branch, that is the hypothalamus. Third order neuron from the thalamus goes to the cortex. The difference with the slow pain is that, see, slow pain when it is going up, it is sending lot of collateral information to reticular formation, which will keep you alert. Okay, there is also the information goes to periaqueductal gray matter. This is the area which is present in midbrain, which will actually, this is because of this, there is an individual variation between pain perception from person to person. And hypothalamus, this is the main center which controls our autonomic nervous system. So if you feel some pain, what will happen? Your heart rate will change, blood pressure will change, respiratory rate will change, you will start sweating. Clear? All these autonomic symptoms are because of the stimulation of hypothalamic nuclei. So now second order neuron is going to the thalamus. In thalamus, remember, initially I told you there is a VPL nuclei. But here what they are referring is midline and intralaminar nuclei. Okay, and when these second order neuron of the C fiber pathway will end in midline nuclei or intralaminar nuclei, from there usually it goes to cortex. But remember, C fiber pathway will go to many areas in the brain. It will not only go to area number 312. This is a diffuse pathway. Remember, C fiber pathway is like when it is traveling, when a slow pain or a dull pain is traveling to your brain, remember, it is not going only to one area. It is disturbing all the other areas nearby. Like in basal gang, like in your brain stem, 3 areas are stimulated, and then when it goes to the thalamus, there is midline and intralaminar nuclei. From here, it goes to like many areas in the cerebral cortex. It is not like going to one specific area for that. Okay, so that is what is the difference between a new pathway and an old pathway. This is the old pathway which we are talking about. So what are the characteristics or the special features of this paleospinothalamic pathway? Okay, it has a non-specific origin, so we cannot like localize exactly from where the pain is coming. Okay, it is poorly localized. We cannot exactly trace this pathway because it goes from the intralaminar nuclei of the thalamus to many areas in the brain. So this is poorly localized tract, and projections to the reticular formation is what keeps the person awake, and it is also connected to the limbic system, and that's why it also elicits some emotional responses whenever a person always continuously has some dull pain, right? So let us just understand this pathway. So there are 3 neurons. Clear? So the first order neuron starts from the spinal cord, starts from the receptor, ends in the lamina 2 of the, see what I am now teaching is paleospinothalamic pathway. Clear? Paleospinothalamic pathway, nothing but it carries slow pain. So from the receptor for slow pain is nociceptor, your C nociceptors. This is the receptor, and the fiber name is C fiber pathway. Cell body is located in the dorsal root ganglia, and this first order neuron ends in the lamina 2 of the spinal cord, which is also called as substantia gelatinosa of Rolando. So the second order neuron starts from the spinal cord, crosses to the opposite side, and it ascends in the lateral funiculus. So this half is called the lateral funiculus of the spinal cord. Clear? Now this fiber now goes up on the opposite side. Don't forget to draw a midline. Okay, so now the second order neuron has crossed to opposite side and it ends in thalamus. So which nuclei in the thalamus? It goes to midline nuclei and intralaminar nuclei of thalamus. It reaches these areas, intralaminar nuclei of thalamus. From there, the third order neuron arises and goes to different areas in the cortex. So it is diffuse supply to cerebral cortex. So when it is ascending up, the second order neuron, when it is ascending up in the brainstem, it gives a branch or a collateral to your periaqueductal gray matter. It gives a branch to reticular formation. Clear? So that it keeps you awake, and it also gives few branches to hypothalamus. That is what controls your autonomic responses associated with pain. And also remember, it has a branch to limbic system, so it controls your emotions. So this is about your paleo-spinothalamic pathway. Next we'll move on to neo-spinothalamic pathway, and this is the most developed one. It carries fast pain. Fibers are mostly A delta fibers. And now the first order neuron terminates in lamina 1 and 5, as I already mentioned, and the neurotransmitter released is substance B. So second order neuron, as I was mentioning earlier, it crosses to opposite side. Second order neurons, they terminate in VPL nuclei, and from here it specifically goes to cortex area number 312. The third order neurons will go to area number 312. So what is the difference between a paleo and a neo-spinothalamic pathway is, this is better localized, okay, because it's very clearly, it runs up as, so if you can see here, the next pathway which I'll explain now here, this is your spinal cord, which I'm now explaining here now is the neo-spinothalamic pathway. Clear? The first order neuron will end in 1 and lamina 5. Okay, this is the first order. The cell body is located in the dorsal root ganglia. The receptors for this is A delta receptors, and the fiber which carries the fast pain is A delta. Remember, because this pathway is thick, the diameter of this nerve fiber is thicker, so the velocity of conduction is also very fast here. So the second order neuron starts from the spinal cord, crosses to the opposite side in front of the central canal of spinal cord, goes specifically to VPL nuclei of the thalamus. From there, third order neuron starts from the thalamus VPL nuclei, goes to area number 312 of the parietal cortex. So if you can see here, it is specifically going to the brain in a very it is not stimulating many other areas. So that is why this pathway will help us in better localizing, and it subserves the discriminative aspect of pain. Like, we can understand the quality of pain or the intensity or how severe is the pain through this pathway. That is why A delta fibers, which carries the fast pain, will help us in understanding the quality of the pain. There are so many different types of pain. Okay, quality, you will understand that when you study further. So this was about neo-spinothalamic pathway and paleo-spinothalamic pathway. Remember, paleo-spinothalamic pathway was an old pathway, which now also we have that. Okay, it doesn't mean this pathway doesn't exist. Both of them have, but they serve a different function. Paleo-spinothalamic pathway will mainly keep us alert and awake because there's a pain is continuously, there's a dull aching pain or a slow pain persists. Fast pain is the immediate one which will come and get activated as soon as there is any tissue injury, and the pathway will directly go to, specifically it goes to area number 312, so that we can understand the quality of pain. And whenever you read a pain pathway for exam purpose, just concentrate on these topics. Okay, they'll ask you usually all the ascending tracks, so you should know all the tracks which are going up from the periphery, okay, via the spinal cord to the brain. So just list out or have a list of all the ascending tracks and explain the pain pathway in detail. That would be a kind of questions what we get in Indian setting here. Name the ascending tracks and explain the touch pathway. The slightly main difference is the A beta fibers are the one which carries the touch sensation. It was A delta and C fiber for pain. For touch pathway, it is A beta. Here also there are three order neurons. Okay, the first order, second order, and third order neurons. And when you're reading about pain pathway, concentrate on endogenous pain inhibiting system, which I'll explain and add it to the video section later. But already referred pain, theories of pain, gate control theory of pain. These are already there in the video section of this channel. So you can concentrate on all these topics when you are reading for your exams. Thank you.